Alright, so this video is already long overdue, but we're just going to do it anyway. And this is every Apple Intelligence feature, but with a catch. And that catch being, we're not going to be doing it on an iPhone like you've seen with every Apple Intelligence video, but we're going to be using an iPad to run every single test. Reason being because I still use an iPhone 14 and the only compatible devices are your 15, 16s, every iPad with an M chip, and Macs with Apple Silicon. So we're going to go through every single Apple Intelligence feature, basing it off from a video Apple posted about a month ago showcasing the hands-on of every available feature across all devices. Because honestly, at this point, you've probably seen every possible Apple Intelligence video, but except one with a hidden feature, which is only supposed to be compatible with the iPads, and one issue which we're going to talk about later on in the video, but let's stay tuned for that. So without further ado, let's get into it. So we have 6 features. It's supposed to be 7, but you get to know why we're testing just 6 in the later part of the video, so stay tuned for that. And grab a popcorn. Also, get subscribed. And so first on the list, photo cleanup. What this is supposed to do is take out any unwanted objects in the background you might not want in your photos, but does it work well? Well, I've noticed it does a good job of removing objects you wish to remove, and if you pay close attention, the generative field does a good job with the processing to fill in what it thinks should be in that erased position. It's not that great, but sincerely, anyone who isn't paying close attention wouldn't even notice. Depends on the picture, of course. What's the use case scenario for this? Well, just as we've said, if you have any unwanted thing you want to remove in your background, you can easily just clean it up. But how often would you be using these things? My guess is hardly, because you wouldn't as much think of removing objects from your background as much as you would remember to drink water. So, on to the next, Genmojis. Generative emojis. Again, one of those features you've probably only used once, and probably just to check how it works. But it's just as it sounds. Generative emojis. You can generate emojis. Remember how we had Memojis where you could create a cartoon style looking version of your face? Well, this one works almost similar. Instead of a U version, you create an emoji. So out of the 3,790 emojis that already exist on your keyboard, you could also decide to generate another 1,250. So the way you access Genmoji is first you pull up your keyboard and select the emoji icon, and there's a little Genmoji icon just at the top right of the keyboard. That animation is cool though. When you click that, a new text box pops up and you can describe with a few words and phrases whatever emoji you wish to generate, and give it a couple of seconds to process, and voila, you have a new emoji. It gives you different variations, but you could only pick one out of all of them. And what's the best case scenario or the use case scenario for this? Well, you have a message to respond to and you can't find one emoji out of the 3,790 emojis already available to you. What do? Yeah, you create one. But hey, I guess the same 5 emojis are the same 5 you use every single day, except for that one time in the week where you have to pick one different from every other one. But I'm sure the target demographic exists for those who want to use this feature. So there you go. Still on generating things, we have Image Playground. So the major difference between Genmojis and Image Playground is that you have more options to create whatever you wish to create, and this one seems more like an image thing now. It has its own app, and you could either create an image from a bunch of suggestions or describe an image and generate one, either from having your own picture or someone else's picture from your contact. You can decide if you want these images to be generated in the style of an animation, illustration, or sketch. So whichever one you choose, it would generate that image in that style. I tried to use my face as a placeholder for these AI models, but in as much as I hate what they do a very terrible job, by the way. This one again does what it's supposed to do, and you can try to add as much option as you would to it, and it would do its possible best to generate what it thinks that image should be. I don't know where it has manufactured braids to give me, but then again, it's good for what it is, and trust me, you wouldn't be spending so much time playing with images. Next on the list of features is Mail Summaries. If you're someone who uses Apple Mail as your daily mails app, you're already familiar with the whole redesign that app has gone through. It now looks a bit chunky, but basically with Mail Summaries, if you have a long mail or a newsletter you subscribe to, it can summarize that whole newsletter in 5 to 6 sentences. Now here's my 2 cents. I think we've already established that every one of these features are good for what they're supposed to do. But we also have notification summaries that tries to summarize your message notifications in 1 or 2 sentences. And it's one of the most awkward form of notifications you've ever received if you have that turned on. I don't want to call it bad, but it's not what you would expect. It feels very robotic and unpredictable, so I wouldn't entirely trust Apple Intelligence to summarize an important mail. If it's an article, maybe you can have that summarized, but just because I don't want to miss the important aspects of the mail, I would just do it myself. So I would say take the time to read that important mail so you don't skip out on any important information. It's good, it works, but I wouldn't entirely trust what it does, at least until Apple Intelligence gets better. Next on the list, writing tools. Writing tools is where we start to see ChatGPT integration. So you have rewrites and ChatGPT with writing tools. So with writing tools, you should be able to do this on any text app, and it's best demoed on the Mac, but if you have an iPad, it works well also. You want to go into notes, and just at the top where you have your tools, you should see the very interesting icon with a pencil on it. The moment you click that, a text box appears and gives you all these options to proofread, rewrite, and in any way or form, whether you want it to be friendly or professional or concise. You could also choose if you want a summary, bring out the key points, or have a list, and even more so, format whatever you've written into a table. And to be fair, it's pretty accurate with proofreading and rewriting, but the one that surprised me the most were the tables. You can always reverse and undo whatever you've just edited. That's cool, but the other side of writing tools is the integration of ChatGPT. So basically, just as it sounds, instead of composing a whole note or a mail, you could just compose one with ChatGPT. More or less like you would if you just go into ChatGPT and type in a prompt, write me a letter or an email. Which one takes fewer clicks isn't really so much up for debate, but I thought it would pop up on the keyboard on every single app, but apparently it doesn't. My initial thought was it didn't work on third-party apps. Would have just said that's typical Apple, but the only app it popped up in was in the Mails app, and I checked a couple of other different apps. It doesn't seem to be there. It would have been great if it was there, but I guess we just have to wait for future updates, or it's just another feature that's good for what it is at the moment. So I might say this is one of the best features yet among every other one we've gone through, but that keyboard thing is just putting me off slightly. I also have one question. Those mails and letters composed by ChatGPT, where are they stored? I know Apple says it secures its data properly and it doesn't save anything to the cloud, but I'm so curious to know where those things, those prompts are stored. But what's interesting about writing tools is that you could get the most out of it, but at the same time, it's still one of those features that everyone would just look at and be like, okay, that exists. Good. Now moving on to the one final feature before we get into the issue that needs to be fixed. And I've only just discovered this, and that's something called Image Wand. I saw a video on 9 to 5 Mac on how this works, but basically if you go into the Notes app, you can pull up this editor toolbar. There's an eraser looking pencil tool that looks like a wand. And what that does basically is lets you create an image like you would in Image Playground. but in notes. So you give it a prompt for some context for what you want it to create and draw a circle next to those prompts and it generates an image. You could also just draw or illustrate something and it tries to figure out what that thing is and tries to generate an image of it. The one case I see a person using this would be to brainstorm thumbnail ideas, but other than that, it's good for what it is. And so that's every feature of Apple Intelligence available on the iPad. And if you stick around to this point, you would remember I said there were 7, or supposed to be 7. The reason why we had to do 6 was because the last feature, you can take a guess on what that is, isn't really available on the iPad, and that is visual intelligence. Visual intelligence happens to only be available with the 16 and 16 Pro, and basically you hold the camera control button to open visual intelligence and it automatically takes you to the camera app and you could scan and save dates easily. It's a really good feature, but why is it only on the iPhone 16s in particular? Here's my take. You have Gemini Live, which is really good. You could just pull up your phone, point at something, and it tells you what that thing is. And yes, your phone is one of the most personal products in your life, but what does it take for you to integrate visual intelligence into the camera app? I don't get why it has to be distinct and made only for the 16s, because it's the same camera app and it's all software. So why not just have everything inside the camera app, or have an option for you to be able to access visual intelligence? Or do something like say, hey Siri, what do you see? And have Siri save the dates of the events or whatever you're trying to point at and look at. But Siri also isn't ready for the real life, and I guess at this point we'll just keep hoping. By the ways, leave a comment, let me know which Apple Intelligence feature you've used more than once. Also drop a like if you enjoyed this video and get subscribed for some WWDC content coming in a few. I'm X2Excel and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.